As long as the Muslims controlled Spain, the Jews had a pretty easy time of it. It was called the Golden Age of Spain because the Muslims were tolerant.
The Inquisition began in 1478, when Pope Sixtus IV issued a decree authorizing the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, to root out heresy in the Spanish kingdoms, a confederacy of semi-independent kingdoms in the area that would become the modern country of Spain. Though the order came from the Church, the monarchs had requested it. When the Inquisition began, the Spanish kingdoms were diverse, both ethnically and religiously, with Jews, Muslims, and Christians living in the same regions. The Inquisition quickly turned its attention to ridding the region of people who were not part of the Catholic Church. It would last more than 350 years. On the ground, groups called tribunals ran the Inquisition in each region. Roles on a tribunal could include an arresting constable, a prosecuting attorney, inquisitors to question the accused, and a scribe. A Grand Inquisitor, a member of the clergy selected by the king and queen, almost always led a tribunal. The Inquisition marked its arrival in each new place with an Edict of Grace. Typically lasting 40 days, the Edict of Grace promised mercy to those who confessed to heresy. After that, the inquisitors persecuted suspected heretics on the basis of anonymous accusations. So the confessors in Seville probably didn't see themselves as actual heretics. Instead, they were hedging their bets by reporting themselves when the consequences were low, rather than risking imprisonment or torture if someone else accused them later on. They were right to worry. Once the authorities arrested someone, accusations were often vague, so the accused didn't know the reasons for their arrest or the identity of their accuser. Victims were imprisoned for months or even years. Once arrested, their property was confiscated, often leaving their families on the street. Under these conditions, victims confessed to the most mundane forms of heresy, like hanging linen to dry on a Saturday. The Inquisition targeted different subsets of the population over time. In 1492, at the brutal Grand Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada's urging, the monarchs issued a decree giving Spanish Jews 4 months to either convert to Christianity or leave the kingdom. Thousands were expelled, and those who stayed risked persecution. Converts to Christianity, known as conversos, weren't even safe, because authorities suspected them of practicing Judaism in secret.
As long as the Muslims controlled Spain, the Jews had a pretty easy time of it, with the exception of the Almohad Muslims, that 70-year period in the 12th century. It was called the Golden Age of Spain because the Muslims were tolerant. The Jews came to hold important positions financially, diplomatically, in the government, and Jewish life developed beautifully. However, the northern Christians, and from Barcelona south, began to push the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula. And the Christians, the Roman Catholic Spaniards, were bitterly anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. Originally, at the beginning, they still needed the Jews, and therefore overt acts of persecution were rare, though the Jews already felt discrimination and the intolerance of the Christians. However, by 1391, the pressure was on for the Jews of Spain to be forced to convert to Christianity. In 1391, there was a pogrom initiated by a Franciscan priest, Vincent Ferrer, that swept Spain. Tens of thousands of Jews were forced to convert, thousands were killed, many thousands others fled. They fled mainly to Portugal, but they also fled to North Africa and to other places in the Mediterranean. So from 1391 to 1492, that century is a century of Jewish persecution in Spain. The Holy Order of the Inquisition was established. The Inquisition was not established against Jews per se. It was established against Jews who had pro forma converted to Christianity, but remained Jewish in their hearts and in their practice. And the Inquisition was meant to root them out and to destroy them because of the fact that they pretended to be Christians and weren't really Christians. But nevertheless, the Inquisition had a terrible effect on Jews as well. There were public burnings, the auto de fe, all sorts of atrocities were committed. The Jewish Spain, the Spain that Jews had lived in for 800 years, now tottered on the brink of extinction. And in 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, Ferdinand completed the conquest of Spain, drove the Muslims out, and they issued an edict under the influence of Torquemada, the chief inquisitor. By the way, Torquemada was probably descended from Jewish converts. We have that many times in Jewish history, that Jews themselves become the worst enemies of the Jewish people, something which can be seen even today regarding the anti-Israel programs which exist in the world. But in any event, Torquemada convinced Isabella, who was a devout Catholic, and we all know wives can convince husbands, and she convinced Ferdinand, and they issued an edict that on a certain date of August 1492, all of the Jews either had to convert or they had to leave Spain. This Spanish expulsion was one of the great tragedies in Jewish history, but it was a great tragedy for Spain as well. Within a century, Spain lost its empire. Within a century, Spain became a second-rate country, never again to regain the prominence that it had when its Jewish population existed. My name is Beryl Wine, and I thank you for watching.
We have to remember that in this 2,000 years of exile that we've suffered so much because we are Jews. The Jews were burnt at the stake. They tried to forcefully convert Jews by the Crusades, by the Inquisition. And when they were expelled from Spain, from Italy, where did the Jews go? The Muslim lands took in the Jews. They embraced us in every Muslim land. Iran, wherever you like, Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire. They took us in and we flourished in their lands. There was no human rights groups to protect us, yet we flourished. It wasn't